Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on IVF with donor eggs hosted by London Egg Bank. We are so pleased to have you join us. I do apologize for the slight delay in starting the webinar. My name is Shifa, and I work at the London Egg Bank as a patient care coordinator. It is an absolute privilege to be with you tonight to discuss a topic that's deeply meaningful and life-changing for so many people. The reason behind arranging these monthly webinar is because we know that the journey to parenthood can come with many questions, emotions, as well as decisions. And our aim this evening is to provide you with clear, compassionate information to support you at every stage. We are thrilled to be joined by a highly respected expert in reproductive medicine, Dr. Michael Summers. He is a consultant in reproductive medicine, and he will walk us through the process of IVF with donor eggs, what to expect, and how we support both donors as well as recipients throughout the journey. After the presentation, we will open the floor to your questions. So feel free to drop them in the question and answer box at any time during the session. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Dr. Summers to begin the presentation. Dr. Summers, over to you.
Thank you, Shifa, and for the introduction, and welcome to the attendees. This is a brief introduction to the concept of fertility treatment through the use of donor egg. I'll go sort of slowly and deliberately through what I think are the essential points I want to try to get across to you this evening. But I'm presenting on behalf of the London Egg Bank, but I will go into a little bit of history about the role of donor egg as a form of fertility treatment. So as a service, we've been doing donor egg of one form or another for several decades. Historically, we used to do overseas egg donation, working with clinics overseas. But in more recent years, with advances in technology, we've been able to fairly successfully freeze, or what we call vitrify, human eggs. And that's then allowed the introduction of egg banking. And so now we can do a variety of different types of fertility treatment through the use of donor egg, pioneering both frozen eggs and fresh eggs, depending on the circumstances and the clinical situation. So we have a long track record of successful treatments through the use of donor egg. And I outline some of those success rates as I go through the presentation. So as I mentioned, in recent years, egg freezing has become possible, or what, strictly speaking, it's vitrification. It's not a freezing process per se, but it's rapid cooling to create a glass, a liquid glass, which is less damaging to eggs. And so the egg bank has been in existence now for around about 10 to 12 years. We have an extensive listing of frozen egg donors, eggs, and we also have an extensive history of successful treatment. You'll notice at the bottom of the slide that over the last 10 years, we have thawed many, many thousands of eggs. I don't want to try to deceive you with the pregnancy rates versus the number of eggs. It's just that typically when couples go through donor egg treatment, they might normally purchase 10 or 12 eggs. So overall, you might have 1,000 couples who went through treatment, but each couple may have purchased 10 or 12 or sometimes 15 eggs. But overall, the success rates from a single cycle can be roughly 2/3 of the eggs that are actually used. So we have a fairly good track record for achieving successful pregnancies for the majority of patients who go through the donor egg option. So one might want to consider why donor eggs are used in the first place. There are a number of reasons. One is, for example, couples may have already tried IVF treatment with their own eggs and have been unsuccessful, and therefore a fertility clinic might have recommended considering donor egg treatment as a viable option. There are, of course, some women, for various reasons, sometimes genetic, sometimes due to a history of cancer and chemotherapy, might go into early menopause in their late 20s or early 30s, and therefore don't have any longer their own eggs, and therefore would look at the donor egg option. So there are various reasons why donor egg in advances in technology might be taken advantage of depending on the situation. But I would say that by far the most significant number of individuals who go through donor egg treatment are those who are in their late 30s or early 40s who have been trying with their own eggs and have been unsuccessful. And as you can see in the bottom right-hand graph, natural conceptions go down as women get older, and this has been known for many, many years. But if you go with the donor egg option, it's relatively independent of the age of the recipient. So young eggs typically are quite successful regardless of the age of the recipient. As I'll show you in an upcoming slide, you do see a slow decline in success rates with donor egg as women get a little bit older. But over age 40, it's only about 1 to 2% per year per age group. So there is a small decrease in overall success rates, even when using donor egg in women who are a little bit older. But it's not a major difference in statistical probability. So the idea with donor egg is you simply change the egg source. You still have to do IVF because you've got to fertilize the eggs and you have to create embryos. But the main difference is that a woman is not using her own eggs, but they're using eggs donated by a younger woman. And the age range for these donors is roughly overall about 20 to 33, but our total range is 18 to 35. But the majority of egg donors will be somewhere around about 20 to 33 years of age. So we're going to create eggs from donors. We're going to then fertilize those eggs. And then at some point, when we create embryos, we're going to put an embryo back after we've primed the womb, which I'll get to shortly. One thing that's often raised when I talk to couples or individuals about the donor egg option is that they often refer to the fact that it's not my egg or it's not my DNA. Now, although this is true, one should not underestimate the other important factors that are needed for a successful pregnancy. But it's the key about eggs in general is that they can be used by any group or race, right? So that's all about procreation. But the minutiae part, the small part, the subtle parts of embryo development and pregnancy are largely dictated by the female and the womb, not the DNA within the egg. So there are a lot of factors that go into determining the overall outcome of a successful pregnancy. Firstly, the embryo has to implant. It needs permission to implant in the womb. That's crosstalk between the embryo and the mother. There's a whole level of genetic regulation called epigenetics, which is largely controlled by the mother and the environment of the uterus. And there are all these molecular signals that are needed to allow an embryo not only to implant, but also to develop. So there's a lot going on between the mother and the embryo that are completely independent of the source of the egg. And I think these are important factors to remember when considering going down the donor egg option, because there's a lot going on. And those who are interested, you could Google what is called the Barker hypothesis, B-A-R-K-E-R, and it will tell you a lot more about the role of the uterus in determining the characteristics of the adult that came out of that womb. So there's a lot of interest in reading about the role of the womb and the embryo and how they develop together in crosstalk. So let's say, for example, you have a couple that have gone through fertility treatment with their own eggs and have been unsuccessful, and their clinician might bring up the possibility of donor egg. And then the next question is just about learning about the options that are available. Part of this is talking to a clinician, either a fertility doctor or a consultant in reproductive medicine, about the donor egg option. We spend a lot of time making sure that individuals and couples are fully informed about the services provided by the London Egg Bank, and so each individual couple will be associated with an egg donation coordinator. And of course, we include, for various reasons, we also include counselling sessions so that individuals or couples can learn more about the regulations in the UK regarding fertility treatment through the use of donor egg. So it's a relatively simple series of steps to move on from purchasing some eggs from the egg bank and being set up to put an embryo back inside a receptive uterus. In general, the womb in the majority of women is a extraordinarily forgiving structure, and it really just responds to hormones. And the only hormones it responds to in a sequential order is natural estrogen and natural progesterone. So you can prime the womb to put an embryo back, simply providing in the right amount natural estrogen and natural progesterone. There are different ways in which you can proceed with donor egg. You can, for example, firstly just create the embryos, right? You can use a fresh egg donor, or you can use frozen eggs. You can simply fertilize those eggs and create embryos. And then once you've created the embryos, then you can separately put an embryo back into a primed womb. That's one option. So with the advent of donor egg and egg banks, the number of options that are available are far greater than the old method of going to overseas egg donation, which you had to synchronize the cycles. You don't need to synchronize the womb and creating the embryo when you're dealing with an egg bank, because you can just separately create embryos, understand what you have, understand the likelihood of success based upon the quality of the embryos, and then in turn prime the womb with estrogen and progesterone at the choosing of the couple or the individual. So you have an enormous amount of flexibility regarding fertility treatment through the use of donor eggs, which didn't exist in the recent past. But this is the basic outline shown here, is that you can change the order, but the basic steps are preparing the womb, fertilizing the eggs to create the embryos, and then putting an embryo back. This summarizes some of the outcomes of pregnancy outcomes of women of different ages who have gone through donor egg treatment. As I mentioned earlier, you will see a slow shift in overall success rates as women go from their less than age 40 up to age 50. As I say, overall, it's about a few percent per each year. Why that is, we don't really understand. But it is something that has been consistently observed worldwide when it comes to donor egg created embryos and transferring in. There's a small age impact of the recipient, but it's not profound. It's, as I say, it's 1 to 2% per year. So these are some of the more predictable and stable things that couples or individuals can think about when they're going down the donor egg path, because the eggs are available and because you can fertilize the eggs at any time and create embryos, and you can put an embryo back whenever you feel like trying to get pregnant, you have a certain efficiency and predictability about the whole process. And so it obviously works quite well for women who have very busy schedules and know that perhaps the best time of year, maybe say a school teacher who wants to create the embryos first and then wait until the school breaks in the summer holidays before they want to put an embryo back. So there's an enormous amount of options available. And of course, that would be part of the discussion that an individual couple would have with the fertility doctor or clinician. It's very important to understand that in the UK, for historical reasons, fertility treatment is highly regulated. And the reason this came about was because obviously in the UK was the first place to achieve successful IVF treatment. And in the early days of IVF, it raised a lot of religious, ethical, and moral issues about the moral status of the embryo and so on. So there are extensive regulations that are in place to ensure that there are no ethical deviations, if you will, from couples who are going through treatment with donor egg. Children who are conceived through the use of donor egg, and it's also true of donor sperm, do have the right under the HFEA regulations to get more information about the egg donor or the sperm donor once they reach the age of 18. And this works extremely well because it means that the whole process has to be completely open and transparent. And I think that's really important for the children conceived through donor egg or donor sperm to be aware of their origins. But this outlines some of the important features, I think, that people need to consider when considering from the standpoint of the HFEA regulations and the use of donor gametes, both eggs and sperm, in the UK. But it's really about transparency and individual rights during the process. Some offspring choose not to find out about the donor. Others are just curious as to why they became donors. It's not as if they're looking for substitute parents. That's not the motivating force. It's really more out of curiosity and understanding of what motivated people to become donors. As I mentioned earlier, the age range is 18 to 35. I would say the majority of donors are 20 to 33. Obviously, we have all different ethnic backgrounds. We also have to do extensive investigations of egg donors. The rejection rate for egg donors is quite high. As a group, clinical group, we review we have meetings every week, extensive meetings, both with the genetic team and with the clinical teams to review all donors before we make a decision on accepting them. Under the HFEA regulations, we have to do extensive infectious disease screening and genetic screening. And as you can see, we have the majority of the donors are a combination of graduates and postgraduates who become egg donors. And this shows the background to some of the motivations that egg donors might have. I think the important one is to help others. I certainly get the impression that when it comes to eggs, there is an extensive sense of sisterhood amongst egg donors and recipients in why they become egg donors. But there are also other reasons, personal experience, or sometimes you've got successful parents who they know that they don't need their remaining eggs anymore, and they're under the age of 35, and they're more than happy to provide eggs to women who obviously need a donor egg. So there are a lot of motivations when it comes to the egg donors and the reason behind their drive to provide eggs for women who obviously do not have eggs. This goes into a little bit more detail about the testing that we do as the donors go through the process. So you imagine that the donors actually go through an extensive amount of screening and testing, and it does really display, I think, their motivation to be successful egg donors. But you have to work, the donors have to work with a donor egg coordinator. They have to have an extensive review of history, pelvic anatomy. They have to be reviewed in some cases by a genetic counselor. They need at least one counseling session so that they can understand fully what's involved in egg donation. And as you look at the bottom part of the screen, you can see that we do a 3-generational family medical history, interested in their education and their work history. A lot of, as we'll see, a lot of the donors make statements about what motivates them. And of course, we have to do all the infectious disease screening and genetic screening to complete the work behind the donor before they actually even do a cycle of egg donation. So this represents a typical database that you might experience when you start to look into the donor egg option. I'm sure that Shifa can give you a little bit more information towards the end of this presentation, because there are different gradations of access to the database depending on level of commitment of the individual or the couple. But this represents one sort of simplistic introduction to the profile of an egg donor. And then you can sometimes get into a little bit more information, as you can see here, for a particular donor, covering what's been screened, covering the genetic testing that's been done on this donor based upon history, and so on. So you can ramp it up depending on your motivation and interest in a specific set of donors. In my experience, individuals or couples will initially perhaps create a short list and then start to fine tune and then ultimately decide on how many eggs to purchase from a particular egg donor. But that's sort of one scenario. I think the key to egg donation is to challenge the donor egg coordinators and ask directed questions so that the patients can feel, the recipient can feel that they've done due diligence on the process and have been fully informed about the various programs offered by the London Egg Bank, so that they can then feel confident that they are then making an informed decision. And I think that's a very important role that the coordinators perform at the London Egg Bank. Here's some pen sketches that various donors have written about their motivations, and I think they're fairly consistent. What a lot of donors will write about becoming a donor. You can see one donor, I thought it would be a great honor to be able to provide eggs for a couple who are striving to build their own family, and so on. So they're really quite moving on occasion, some of the motivations. particularly those where they have personal experience of a family member who needed fertility treatment. This is a pretty important slide because one needs to go into, as with any branch of medicine, and reproductive medicine is no different. It's very important to understand that when we're dealing with eggs in embryos, it's really biology. And sometimes biology can be unpredictable, it can be messy. So when we talk about starting off with 6 eggs or 10 eggs, we're really talking about averages, right? So in medicine in general, we typically talk about averages. So if you start off with 6 eggs, you might end up with 1 or 2 blastocysts. If you start off with 10 eggs, you might end up with 3 or 4 blastocysts. But equally, you could start off with 6 eggs and end up with no blastocysts because it's biology. We have other cases where a couple purchase 10 eggs and they end up with 8 blastocysts, and everybody's absolutely delighted. But the egg bank does have policies in place to protect the interest of the individual or couple in the event that they end up with no embryos. So they have packages with offering a new batch of eggs at no cost and reduced cost of treatment and things like that. So those things are important, I think, to understand in terms of what the egg bank provides when you go through a treatment cycle, because as I say, it's a biological process. Until you fertilize the eggs, you don't know truly what the viability of those eggs are. Under the microscope, all eggs look the same. They are referred to as mature eggs or so-called M2 oocytes. They all have the same appearance under the microscope, but their ability to produce a top quality blastocyst is highly variable, and that comes down to individual biology. And so sometimes we are delighted, sometimes we're disappointed because for that reason. But as I say, that the egg bank people are very sensitive to having a less than optimal outcome and have packages to deal with that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you back to the lovely and delightful Shifa and just talk a little bit more about what she does a lot of the time, which is talk about packages. So I'll hand back to Shifa now, and she can go through the last few slides with you.
Thank you, Dr. Summers. Before we move on with the presentation, just a reminder for everyone to keep putting their questions down in the chat box. I can see already that there are some questions, but if you can put more, it would be great because we will be going through them one by one in the end. Coming back to the presentation now. So at London Egg Bank, we offer different kind of packages, which depending on the patient's need. So we do some single cycle packages, and then we do some 2-cycle refund packages. The single cycle packages, you can purchase a batch of eggs and you can pay for treatment. The treatment will include 1 embryo transfer as well as embryo creation, and you would need to pay for frozen embryo transfers if required. But our refund packages, which are also called the 2-cycle packages, which are quite popular, these are gold and silver packages. The silver package gives a 50% refund if you don't have a baby after 2 cycles, and the gold package gives a 100% refund if you don't have a baby after 2 cycles. So these packages are subject to medical review. So we would advise you that if you're interested in these packages, please mention to your doctor when you're having a consultation with one of our fertility specialists, and they can advise if you'd be eligible for these packages. But the basic criteria is that the woman has to be under the age of 50 who is carrying the pregnancy, and it is also subject to semen quality and a medical history review. It includes unlimited embryo transfers, which is the unique feature of these packages, and which is also why they are so popular. It includes all fresh and frozen transfers that will be required from 2 cycles. It gives you up to 2 donor egg allocations, and you get access to a curated list of donors from whom we've had the outcomes from. So our matching coordinators will be able to help you take your preferences and would be able to suggest some matches for you for these packages. Next slide, Mrs. Summers. Thank you. So why choose London Egg Bank, and what is so unique about London Egg Bank? So firstly, we are the UK's leading recruiter of egg donors, which means that we have most expensive and diverse database for both fresh and frozen donor eggs, which gives you the freedom to choose a donor who aligns with your preferences, whether it's physical characteristics, education background, or personality traits, and begin your treatment without the long waiting times. Secondly, we are proud of our excellent success rates, and our success wouldn't be possible without our incredible team. You'll be supported by dedicated fertility specialists, coordinators, embryologists, and counselors, all of whom specialize in egg donation and understand the emotional, medical, as well as the practical aspects of this journey. And lastly, to give our patients even greater peace of mind, we also offer embryo guarantees with our treatment, which Mrs. Summers already spoke about. This means we commit to delivering a certain number of embryos from the eggs that you purchase. Next slide, please. So if you are ready to take the next step with us, it starts with booking in an initial doctor's consultation to get your medical history reviewed and create a treatment plan for your donor egg treatment. Our matching coordinators will then help you in selecting a donor, and a patient care coordinator will help you in completing your checklist for treatment. We also offer counseling, which is free of charge for our registered patient to support them in their treatment journey. And once these steps are completed, we then arrange a nurse consultation to discuss your treatment plan and arrange medications for your treatment. And you will then be able to start your treatment from the next period for the woman who's carrying the pregnancy. And as a thank you for attending today, we are pleased to offer you reduced fee initial consultation package, and the details of which are on the slide. You'll all be receiving an email tomorrow offering these consultation price. If you would like to proceed with booking consultation or the investigation appointments with us, feel free to respond to that email with your registration details, and we'll be able to register you and assist you in your bookings. Okay, so I believe that brings us to the end of our presentation today. Dr. Summers, did you have anything to add before we move on to our question and answer session?
No, I hope that I've got the message across that we have a very long track record in high success rates with our program, and we're extremely proud of all the members of the team, from doctors all the way down to the lowly dishwasher, basically. And so we're very happy. It's a vibrant team, enthusiastic, and they are generally always available to talk to individuals or couples who are planning their journey through the use of donor eggs. So.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to our Q&A sessions. The first question is, does egg donor took their stimulation by their own, like NHS funded IVF cycle, or clinic given everyday dose injections to donor? I'm asking because what if in case they forget or miss the timing and they ultimately egg quality will compromise?
All egg donors, before they start treatment, are very carefully counseled and have sessions with the nursing team, depending on the clinic, but they have sessions with the nursing team so that we can be fully aware that they know exactly what's expected of them. In general, as with IVF, it takes about 2 weeks of hormonal stimulation and monitoring and egg collection to complete a cycle of egg donation. I think in my experience, it's very rare that once patients begin their treatment, that they back out. That's not to say that some donors do not back out, because they do. They do it for various reasons. One is they suddenly realize that they don't like needles, even though they had sessions with the nursing team. But I would say overall, once an egg donor begins a cycle of treatment, over 95% of those egg donors will complete their treatment and have eggs that are then donated to the egg bank. And of course, we just treat them in the same way as that we would treat any couple doing IVF with their own eggs, right? We monitor them, we dose them with hormones relevant to their age, their BMI, their ovarian reserve. We do all that testing before we ever set up a patient for an egg donation cycle. So we have a pretty good idea how much medicine we will give egg donors when they go through a treatment cycle. But in general, I'm trying to very roughly get somewhere between 12 and 16 eggs from an egg donor, which means that we're only trying to get the cream of the crop. We're trying to get 7 or 8 really good eggs from each ovary that can then be donated to the egg bank. I don't see any benefit in taking egg donors who are volunteering their time and their emotional energy and input into an egg donation cycle to try to get 30 eggs from them. I just don't do it. I'm trying to get the best quality eggs from a cohort of eggs that are in the ovary at the time of treatment. And overall, it works. For the majority of donors, it works extremely well.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Summers. The next question is, what is a blastocyst? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's an egg is a one cell. Before it's fertilized, it's just a one cell. Right, you fertilize it, it's still one cell, and then it divides. And as with all mammalian eggs, the division rate is symmetrical, right? So you go from 1 cell to 2 cell, and then you go from 2 cell to 4 cell, and then 8 cell, 16, 32, 64. And after about 7 divisions, you're going to have somewhere between about 120 and 180 cells. At that stage, if it's a healthy embryo, it will be a blastocyst, which is a certain morphologic feature of the early embryo. It's still an embryo that has yet to implant. So historically, we used to do in IVF, human IVF, we used to do day 3 embryo transfers at the 6 to 8 cell stage. With improvements in technology and culture media for embryos, it's been possible to culture most embryos to the blastocyst stage. And there's a huge selection bias for embryos that get to the blastocyst stage because they're more robust. So I don't know of many IVF clinics that would nowadays would do a day 3 embryo transfer. Overwhelmingly, every IVF clinic does blastocyst transfer because you're selecting out by far the most robust, the strongest embryos. So really, it's a matter of an embryo that's gone through about 7 cell divisions in a nice symmetrical geometric progression. And then at that stage, you form the blastocyst. And the interesting thing about the blastocyst is that it now consists of cells that one group is going to be the placenta and the other group is going to be the fetus. So you've got 2 cell types. Strictly speaking, you have 3 cell types, but mostly you've got 2 cell types at the blastocyst stage. Those cells that are going to form the placenta and therefore control the implantation of the embryo. And then you have a smaller group of cells within the blastocysts, which are actually the future embryo proper. And that's what we're looking for. And we grade those blastocysts for their quality, and then we rank those blastocysts for transfer based upon the quality of those embryos. So it's a really important stage for selection for not only women using their own eggs for IVF treatment, but also for donor egg IVF.
Thank you. The second part of that question is regarding guarantee, so I can answer that. But the question is, if only one embryo comes out, could I be able to buy more eggs free of charge? Please, could you give me a bit more info about this? So it will depend on the number of eggs that you purchase. As per LEB guarantee, we guarantee that from 6 eggs, you will have at least 1 embryo to transfer. And from 10 eggs, you will have at least 2 embryos to transfer. If the guarantee is not met and there were no sperm issues, then we would offer you a new cohort of eggs free of charge and a reduced treatment cost. The next question is, do all of the procedures take place at your clinic?
Well, we have a number of clinics that can offer a full spectrum IVF service. So we have satellite offices, throughout the south of England and South London and down to the Brighton and so on. Some of those are satellite services where we do monitoring and ultrasounds and that sort of thing. But then the donors would have to travel to London, for example, to donate their eggs. So we have IVF services for example, in Cardiff. I'm based in Bristol, so we do all our monitoring in Bristol. But then the egg donors would then go to either Cardiff or London for the egg collection. You can, for example, create embryos in one clinic and then ship them to another clinic. Right. So depending on what type of package you purchase, it is possible to let one service create the embryos, and then once you have the embryos, you could then ship them to another clinic for embryo transfer. So there's a lot of flexibility because we have a lot of satellite services. There's a lot of flexibility that can be incorporated into the cycle of egg donation.
Thank you. I do see a couple of questions about South Asian donors and the wait times for those donors to reserve them. Just wanted to let you know that you can go to our website and access our donor catalog, which will show you all the donors that we currently have available. There are some filters that you can use. So if you go to our website, do search for donors, and it will open the catalog. There are some filters, so you can choose the ethnic origin filter, choose South Asian, and it will give you a list of donors. I do believe there are about 4 full pages of donors. There are Indian donors as well. So these are all the donors that there are no waiting times. They are ready to be thawed and be used in treatment. So no, there is no waiting times to use frozen donor eggs. The next question is, hi, can we purchase eggs and create embryos with your clinic and then undergo embryo transfer with our current clinic? So in terms of the process, yes, that is possible. We can create embryos for you at our clinic in our lab, and we have a dedicated transport team who can help you in arranging the transport of embryos to your current clinic for your treatment. The next question is, Dr. Summers, for you, how rigorous the checks are on the egg donor, please? Example on patient history, past generation, is it on face value?
Well, as I mentioned during the presentation, we are highly regulated. So it's not like we can be sloppy about recruiting donors. We have to do due diligence on every aspect of the medical, genetic, infectious disease history of the egg donor. And we reject more donors than we actually recruit for that reason. So it's it's an extremely rigorous process. And as I also mentioned that we have weekly meetings to review all egg donors who come through the process to make sure that we're dotting I's and crossing T's. Sometimes we get additional information from the family history. We want to see some test results that, say, for example, the mother might have had done when she was in her early 30s. So every egg donor is really, it's individualized management and care before we accept them as an egg donor. So I think it's a pretty thorough process, mainly because of the HFEA and the fact that we are highly regulated in the UK, which is not the case in most other countries. So we have to follow the diktats of the HFEA, or else we wouldn't have a license.
Thank you, Dr. Summers. The next question is it not the parents' choice to disclose their child when they come to age about donor, or is it that the HFEA shares with children anyway?
I think that to some extent comes down to the individuals who are using donor egg in terms of what decisions they make. But under the regulations, it is appropriate that any children conceived through donor egg or donor sperm are really, I think, obligated to inform the child how they came into the world. Because you don't want to, and this has been well studied, children that are conceived through donor eggs or donor sperm, if they find out at some later date by accident that they were conceived and they were never informed, it can have quite a devastating effect on the child if they found out that something was held from them. So I think it's better, at the end of the day, it's far better for a couple to share with that child how they were conceived. And where it's important, of course, is that you need to have information about the egg source, right? The family medical history, because it's not as if the child can say, well, my father has this, my father has that, and my mother has this, and my mother have that, when that would not be strictly true in terms of a family medical history. So what a lot of couples do is that they will take the family medical history of the egg donor and actually put it into a beautifully bound folder and then share it with the child when the child is older. So I think a good policy is not to try to disguise how a child was conceived. Be it frozen sperm or frozen egg, because sometimes they will find out by accident, because they might do, for example, 23andMe testing and find out who they match up with. And this is, in fact, in America, this is how couples have found out more about their sperm donor, because they can do a match for a genetic link to somebody who donated sperm and then discover that it was not from the father, but from a sperm donor. So that nowadays, with all this gene testing going on, there are very few secrets you can keep indefinitely.
Thank you. Next question is, does endometriosis in the recipient affect success rate of donor egg cycle?
There's endometriosis, and then there's endometriosis, and then there's endometriosis. there are degrees of gradings of endometriosis. A small amount of endometriosis generally would not impact IVF success rates. If there were extensive endometriosis, then I, for example, will use a different approach to the frozen embryo transfer by firstly suppressing any endometriosis before I started priming the womb. So you have to, from a clinical standpoint, you have to look at the situation and then have a frank discussion with the individual or the couple about what might the best strategy might be to optimize the chance of a successful outcome. So if there's a history of extensive endometriosis, say stage 3 or stage 4, I usually do what is called a suppression cycle to try to, because endometriosis can be quite inflammatory, and you want to try to suppress that inflammatory reaction of the endometriosis before you put an embryo back. So sometimes I will do a down-regulation cycle and suppress the ovaries and any estrogen that's around before I start priming the womb to put an embryo back. So it really is about individualized care depending on the history and the grading of the endometriosis.
Thank you. I see a couple of questions asking the price for gold and silver package. So the silver package is £22,000 and the gold package is £30,000. Our costs can also be found on our website, londoneggbank.com. You can refer to our cost page. The next question is, does the Brighton Satellite Clinic do semen analysis, or would this have to be done in London? I don't believe the Brighton Satellite Clinic is able to do semen analysis. You will need to travel to London for this appointment. In terms of transfer of fertilized eggs, how many do you typically transfer in someone over 40 years old, increasing the possibility of twins?
We are quite reluctant to transfer 2 embryos from donor egg because the risk of twins is quite high. The other thing is that in the UK, any woman over the age of 40 who gets pregnant, regardless of how she gets pregnant, be it naturally or through IVF treatment, is considered a high-risk pregnancy. So you're monitored and managed quite differently than, say, a 30-year-old who gets pregnant. And for that reason, if you have a twin pregnancy, you don't double the risk of that pregnancy, but it's sort of a more exponential increase of is additive beyond just a doubling. So we're very reluctant to put back more than 1 embryo, particularly if we have top quality embryos. Now, there are situations where perhaps a couple had a couple of top quality embryos and then 2 very poor quality embryos, and therefore they have a lower chance of resulting in pregnancy. We might, under that circumstance, if they didn't get pregnant with the first 2 top quality blastocysts, we might then say, yeah, we can put 2 back of these lower quality because each implantation event is an independent event. It's independent of the other embryo. So the probability that 2 poor quality embryos would implant is going to be lower than 2 top quality embryos implanting. So you can still individualize the care depending on the situation. But it also requires a lot of counseling about the risks associated with a twin pregnancy, because they say that the risks are amplified beyond just a doubling. And then premature delivery and all the complications of premature delivery and the comorbidities associated with premature delivery. So Uh, we would be defying the guidelines of the HFEA if we started putting back large numbers of did I lose my screen?
I think you've come to the end of the slideshow. If you just tap
Uh,
any key.
okay, all right. So I think that you can individualize the care, but as a matter of policy, we would not do a two embryo transfer unless everybody been fully counseled and signed documents to knowing that they're aware of the risks.
Thank you. Next question is, what is better, fresh or frozen eggs?
That's an interesting question. It's a very relevant question. I'm glad it was asked. Uh, I think in general, what we're talking about here is creating blastocysts from a fresh egg versus blastocysts from a frozen egg, right? Because that would be a single step process. It's simply take the eggs and create the blastocysts. So if you look at the outcome of blastocyst transfers from fresh egg versus frozen egg, the fresh egg is a little bit higher in terms of success rate. It's not enormously higher, like 30% higher, but it's somewhere around about 5 to 10% higher with when using fresh eggs than frozen eggs. But that's not true of all cases because as I mentioned earlier in my talk, you can have situations where you get nice eggs, but you get no blastocysts, right? So because you don't know the potential of those eggs until they're actually fertilized by sperm. And then sometimes there is an unknown sperm factor that wasn't appreciated at the time. Um, but I think overall the trend is that you're going to see a slightly higher pregnancy rate with blastocysts derived from fresh eggs than with frozen eggs.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. Just a few more questions. When choosing an egg donor, I already know my blood type, but my husband doesn't know yet. Is it important for him to know his blood type before purchasing donor eggs?
Not generally, no. I mean, I think that in the event of pregnancy, you because obviously you will have the blood type of the egg donor. That's part of our screening. Uh, the only issue with blood type is the RH, so-called RH factor, and that's so you could have even a couple where the woman is RH negative, but the husband is RH positive, and you would still treat the RH negativity in the event of pregnancy. So you have the same arrangement if you're using RH positive or negative, but the blood group itself is not germane to the process. It really is just the RH factor which you have to take into account. But I said there are lots of couples out there having children where one partner is RH positive and the other partner is RH negative, but you just treat it in the event of pregnancy by giving RH factor, and then you basically solve the problem. So.
Thank you. There are a few questions from me which I can go through. I'm going to purchase and start the treatment. I work as well. How many sessions do I have to come into before I will potentially conceive? So I think this will depend on your treatment plan, but typically for donor egg treatment, we advise that you should be able to come to the clinic at least for 2 to 3 scans when you are in treatment, and then for an embryo transfer. And if you're using partner sperm, then your partner will need to come to the clinic for embryo creation. So I would say 2 to 3 appointments over a period of 2 to 3 weeks. Dr. Summers, anything to add to this?
No, I think for that's pretty standard for
Okay.
a frozen embryo. or fresh embryo transfer, that you would need to, you've got to monitor the lining of the womb before you make a decision before putting the embryo back. So you would get a baseline scan and maybe 2 or 3 more scans, and then you'd have the embryo transfer. So you're looking at probably 3 or 4 visits during that process. And then, of course, you need a sperm source, and therefore that would be 1 visit from the partner.
Yeah. There is a few questions where people are asking that they are from other fertility clinics, and if so, how does this work in terms of consultation, screening, tests, and matching? So we do have third-party agreements with some of the UK clinics. So you would be able to find the list on our website. When you go to register, it will ask you if you're already registered with a fertility clinic. Choose yes, and it will show you a list of clinics that we have third-party agreements with. If you are their patient and you already have a treatment plan in place, then we can arrange a call with our team, and they can guide you on the process. But basically, we can transport the eggs to your clinic for your treatment. And you would not need to have any consultation or screening tests with us. We will only help you with matching and purchasing the eggs. And there are some questions saying that if they already have semen test and pelvic scans, do they need to repeat it with us? If the scan is from within 6 months and semen analysis is from within 12 months, and then you would just need a doctor's consultation, because we can accept those reports. Just the last question, because I do understand we're running out of time. How long can eggs safely be frozen for? Is it possible to purchase now and store for treatment at a later date?
Well, you can. I mean, obviously, the HFEA regulations allow you to freeze eggs for decades. But I believe that there's in terms of the egg bank, there is a policy with regard to usage, and you probably know better than I, Shifa, about that aspect of the egg bank. You have to, I think you have to utilize them within a certain period of time. But under the HFEA regulations, you can freeze eggs for decades now. It wasn't the case a few years ago, but they changed the laws to allow women to, if they had social egg freezing, for example, they could freeze them. I think for up to 50 years, but it's a long time. So most people presumably would use their eggs before 50 years had elapsed. But I think that the regulations with regard to the egg bank are a little bit different than the HFEA regulations in terms of storage time.
Yeah. So once you've purchased eggs, you need to use those eggs within 4 months in creating embryos. Once the embryos are created, you can have a transfer anytime. There's no deadline for that. But we do recommend that you use the embryos as soon as possible, so that we have outcomes, because the donors do ask us sometimes if the donation has been successful. We do not give out any identifiable information, but the donors have the right to know if their donation has been successful, and if any child has been born from their donation, we are able to tell them the sex and year of birth of any children born, but no other identifiable information. Perfect. We do have some more questions, but thank you so much for all your questions. Please do send us an email with your questions, and we would be happy to answer. Unfortunately, we're running out of time today, but we do these webinars monthly, so feel free to attend another one, and we would be happy to answer your questions. I would like to give a big thank you to Dr. Summers for sharing such valuable insights and expertise with us today. Your knowledge and experience has given us a deeper understanding of how important this topic is. And a big thank you to all our attendees as well for joining us and for your thoughtful questions. We hope this session has been informative and helpful for you. We look forward to seeing you for our future sessions. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.